Thanks for clicking on this video. This video is about the Affordable Homes Fund 21-26 CME route, and it's about claiming, and it's video 2B of the series of videos. And video 2B is all about taking your approved data from an indicative offer line to be ready to make a claim. My name's Susan Roberts. This video was recorded in June 2021 and therefore reflects IMS at this point in time. So first of all, the structure of this video. The video is aimed at new and inexperienced users of IMS who have indicative offer lines that have been approved in IMS that they are looking to make a claim on. I'm also going to cover in this video splitting of scheme profiles. So that's something that you're going to do or think you're going to do, that is covered later on in this video. After this screen, I'm going to be looking at how to use the videos before going on to look at a reminder about what's in an indicative offer line, and then how that indicative offer line data moves to profiles and forms a bulk line, and what that looks like. I'm then going to look at how you would schedule individual schemes and units out of that bulk, and also looking at splitting, or you could think of phasing of scheme profiles. At the very end, I will look at the other claiming videos that are in this series for new and inexperienced users. All data that I'm going to show you in IMS has been set up specifically for this video and is not live data entered by a provider, so there are no data protection issues or data confidentialities with this data. For those of you that have bid for funding under the Rough Sleepers Accommodation Programme, RSAP, these claiming videos are also going to be added to the RSAP playlist. So they're not specific to RSAP, but most of the functionality also appears in RSAP, so it makes sense to include these videos there as well. So first of all, how to use this video. So if you've got the video open with a description and text below, at the end of the description, you'll only see sort of 3 lines on screen of a description. If you click on the show more on screen, that shows the full description where I have described what's in each video. And under that, there are timings for the various parts of each video. These are hot links. So if you click on the time, it will take you to that point in the video. So first of all, a refresher on what an indicative offer line looks like. The screens in IMS for offers and profiles at times can look very similar, certainly when you get into the detail of the screen. So what I'm going to do is, when I'm showing you offer line screens in this video, those screens will be grey. And when I'm showing you profile screens in this video, they'll be coloured blue to help you distinguish between the two. So let me take you into IMS and talk you through an indicative offer line that's already been input. So to get to an offer line, it's offers, offer system, and then offer line. So I'm logged on as a training provider, and I'm going to pull up all the information for this provider for the 21-26 programme. Okay, so there are 3 offer lines that have been set up, and you'll see that the middle one of those on screen, in terms of proposal type, says it's indicative. So that's the line that I'm going to go into. So whenever you're in one of these screens, as you might have heard me say before, if you click on the second column in, so I want to look at offer lines, and I'm looking at second column in. Okay, so general information at the top about the partnership name, the offer name, and the offer line description. Over the right-hand side of the screen, I can see that the offer line ID, I can see that the offer line has been allocated. The data status is valid, and it's about bringing empty homes back into use and it's an indicative offer line. Now you'll see that none of the buttons at the bottom of the screen are active, and that's because you can't change anything in an approved offer line. So let me go through the two tabs that we can see, geography and products. So first of all, the geography tab. First thing to notice is that this indicative offer line has been set up for a specific local authority. And under the 21-26 programme, that is all that you can do. You have to set it up under a local authority. For those of you who have an RSAP offer line, you will find that your screen is slightly different at this point. Under RSAP, you could identify the region minimum geography, and then local authorities underneath could be identified. Now, the reason I'm highlighting this one is later on we're going to have to add a site to IMS when we split out, and that site must be in the local authority that's been identified here, or for RSAP, in one of the local authorities that you originally identified. So IMS will do that check that you're matching your local authority information. Let me go to the products tab. So this is a purchase and a repair scheme. Underneath it is Help to Buy shared ownership. So that won't be the case under the RSAP programme. It will only be a rental product that you'll have under there. But it shouldn't make much difference to what we're going to be doing and looking at in the screens. I'll try and point out where the differences are. So it's 10 units, £235,000. Total scheme costs, capital contributions and funding requested, all identified at the bottom. So let me go into the detail of this indicative offer line, which is under the sub-product name. So in this case, as you'll see, as I move my mouse, we get Help to Buy shared ownership, and that clicking on that allows us in. Okay, so the top information brings through information that we've already seen on screen. And this is where you would have originally input your number of units and your funding requested. So we have a series of tabs underneath. So the revenue income is to do with your rental income. And for home ownership, specifically, it also includes the rental from the shared ownership units. If you've got a home ownership offer line, you'll only have data at the bottom part of the screen. If you've got a rental, then it will only be at the top of the screen. Let me click on the next tab along, which is the units tab. So I've only got one type of unit here. You might have multiples. To see the detail, I double click on the line. And that opens up the detail of the offer line. So you can see it's very basic information, number of units, number of persons, number of bedrooms, approximate size, that its general needs. On RSAP, it would be disabled and vulnerable. Then you'd have Section 106, so these aren't Section 106 units. On a shared ownership line, it also asks me for a market value, and that is a per unit market value. The assumed average first tranche sale, and after you've entered that information in there, the rent per week is also identified. So let me click on cancel to close that window. So the next tab along is capital contributions. So you can see a small number of capital contributions adding up to a total. There's a value in every single box, even if some of that, like the first one, is 0. And there's also a 0 in terms of, on this one, affordable homes guarantee. And that will certainly be the case for everyone on RSAP. Just to point out this last one, because this only applies to shared ownership, you'll see that the value of total initial sales income, this has been automatically calculated by IMS based on what's in your unit details. If you've got a rental line, this line doesn't appear in the capital contributions. Let me go across to scheme costs next. So you can see the cost of acquisition works on costs, which are added together to give your total scheme costs. Then pulls through the capital contributions. If you're an unregistered body, It will also have pulled through a transfer value, and then finally the funding requested. Item L on this screen is going to be important for later on. The surplus or deficit on any offer line or scheme profile must be 0 when you're ready to validate and submit. So that's certainly one that we need to watch when we're doing changes to costs to make sure that ultimately that is correct. Let me go to the delivery profile. So the delivery profile identifies when your starts and completions are expected by quarter and the expected payments for starts and completions. Now this comes up slightly differently for ARSA, but it's the same basic information. Don't worry at this point that your starts are showing 50% of the total grant and your completions 50%. This will sort itself out once you come to go to your profile and look to split units and funding out of your indicative bank. You're at what will be known as a bulk line at that point. Scheme progress identified where you were up to with identifying property and property acquisition. On RSAP, these screens are slightly different. And then finally, additional information, which was a series of questions that you had to answer. These last two tabs, the scheme progress and the additional information, will not transfer through to the approved part of IMS where you will do further editings, which is your profiles. So I'm now going to look at what's known as bulk from an indicative offer line. And as we go through, what I mean by bulk will become clearer. So approved offer lines, as I identified in video 1 in this claiming series, cannot be edited. The data moves to the profiles part of IMS. Profiles have version control on them, but you can only ever edit the most recent version of that. And that when you edit, that will create a new version if it's your first edit at that point. The data from each indicative offer line is copied to a single profile in IMS. And IMS will create 2 automatic versions for you. In version 1, all the data transfers through to the bulk line, other than the 2 bits of data that I identified when we were looking at that indicative offer line. So the scheme progress and the additional information don't transfer. So version 2 on a profile that's originally come from an indicative offer line, the data is identical. So you will be able to edit that bulk line and schedule out individual units and schemes from that. I often think of as bulk as line as a banking line. Just so that you're aware, that bulk line will be editable until the units and funding in it have been reduced to 0. So you can add units and funding back into bulk and then take them out of bulk again if an individual unit were to fall away or anything like that. But once that has reached 0 in terms of units and grant, then you can't make any further edits on a bulk line. And that is exactly the same as the bulk line that appears on a profile that has originally come from a firm offer line. So let me show you what the profile looks like. So back in IMS, and this time I'm going to look at profiles. So I've gone to blue screen again, offers, offer system, profile, pull through all the profiles. And it's my indicative profile that I want. So it's the shared ownership line. Okay, so initially this screen looks very different. You can see at the top, it says version 2, but we've only got one line on screen and that's a bulk line. Profile type is bulk. and we've got a description underneath that's the bulk for, and then the line description. And the same units and funding. So to go into the detail, I move my pointer up, it will change to a hand and that becomes a hot link. So let me click on that. So I've got a series of tabs and some of them will be the same as before and some will be slightly different. So the profile tab is totally new, but actually when you look at the detail of what's in there, it's actually come from elsewhere in IMS. So we've got a description and it identifies in front of it that it's bulk schedule for. We've got a number of units and an amount of funding. Next tab is new, which is organisations. Now, what IMS has assumed on this profile is that the lead provider is the developing, owning, during development and ultimate owners of the units. You will be able to change that if you need to later on. There's also a new question that's appeared here. Are you intending to work with SME contractors on the scheme? And that will be a yes, no drop down. So next tab, because this is empty homes, is new. We input the processing route as purchase and repair. So it's identified that here. And there's also a box that will stay blank of estimated length lease. So that would become active if we'd chosen the lease and repair processing route, but this is purchase and repair. Let me go to revenue income. So revenue income is identical to the offer line. Unit details next. So it looks a bit bigger on this screen, but actually, if I go into the data by double clicking on there, actually the data is identical to what I had previously. Let me click on cancel. The design tab is grayed out, so we can't go into that. There's capital contributions, and you will see that there actually are slightly more categories of capital contributions than previously, but they've been zeroed out automatically by the system. There is also a new one that's appeared, which is other public subsidy, and that's currently blank. We'll see that one a bit later. Scheme costs is identical to our offer line, and so is our bulk schedule. So this time, rather than it being called a profile, it's now called a bulk schedule. So let me click on the close button. So next, scheduling out of bulk and splitting. So why do we need to schedule out of bulk or split? Well, the main reason is that you can't claim against units that are in your bulk line. Units must be against a scheme profile to make a claim. So normally if you're doing splits, it will be to phase a scheme, so phasing the completions on that scheme. And so they'll normally be on the same profile, but actually they don't have to be. So it might be that you've got some units that are originally intended to be rent that are now going to be shared ownership. So in that case, when you're doing your split, you will need to add in one place and reduce in another. Overall, any changes that you make, unless you're handing back units and grant, which should match. So think of it like a balance scale. If you add something, you've got to take it away from somewhere else. So that does mean that you will need to reduce everything down in one place and add the equivalents in another scheme profile or new offer line, potentially, if you're changing local authority or if you've got a different tenure to move the units to, if you don't already have that tenure set up. So when you're doing splits, it's probably best if you have everything set out, all those splits set out on paper in front of you when you're inputting the data. What you'll find in IMS is that surplus and deficit will go up and down as you change data. And it can get very confusing when you're looking to balance things. So actually, it is best to do that on paper first. And what I'm going to show you on the next slide is a clip of what I've done for this video, where I've taken my bulk data and I've looked at how I'm going to split that. Now, in mine, I've done a full pro rata split of everything. You don't actually have to do that. You can have more in some cases than in others. They don't always have to be equal splits, and it might be that your capital contributions on a scheme is a bit more than you were expecting initially when you bid, and that's fine to make those changes in there. Just so that you're aware, although sometimes we might talk about it, and we might talk about deleting your bulk, you can't actually delete a bulk line. You can only ever reduce the units and funding to 0 in there. You can delete a scheme profile, provided that a scheme hasn't already been created against it. If necessary, you can do a termination on a scheme, or we can do that for you. So I know this is quite hard to see on screen, but what I've got here is my examples of splitting. So you can see I've taken some screenshots. So I've got my capital contributions all set out here. And then what I've done is next to them, I've worked out what a bulk line will reduce to if I'm going to be left with 9 units on a pro rata split. And if I'm scheduling out 1 unit, what I would expect those capital contributions to roughly be. So mine is a pro rata split, but yours doesn't necessarily have to be that, provided they're more or less the same values. You can see that I've gone on to do that with the scheme costs and also on the bulk schedule. So scheduling out of bulk. Your indicative offer lines are only possible for empty homes and hold in the 21-26 programme and for the RSAP programme as well. Each indicative offer line for 21-26 programme is a single for a single local authority. As I said before, that is slightly different for RSAP, but that same local authority, or for RSAP local authorities, must follow through on the profile. So your bulk lines can be thought of as a bank line that you take in and out of. So the process for scheduling out of bulk is to first of all reduce the values that are in bulk. If the units you're looking to split out are in the same local authority as that bulk line was originally set up for, you will then go on to add a new scheme. And within that same profile, you will add a new scheme profile for the units that you are looking at ultimately claiming against. If those units are in a different local authority to the bulk line, you will need to add a new site and a new offer line. And when you're entering that, you will need to select substitute as the offer line source and then add your indicative offer line. Or if you know the units at that point, you could actually add it as a firm offer line, which will then save having to split it out of bulk when it gets to a profile. If you are having to make changes in 2 places, the comments that you input in IMS should refer to both changes, and both of those changes should be submitted at the same time so that Homes England can assess the changes together. So you will have to submit them individually, but you should submit them at the same time in the system. So next, splitting a scheme profile. So the most common reasons to split a scheme profile are for changes in phasing of completions or changes in tenure. And it is possible to do that split after one or more of the milestones have been claimed. But before you do that, can you please make sure that you talk to my colleagues who are in provider management team first, because there will ultimately need to be a journal of payments, and they will help you look at the data that you need to use when making that split and provide you with advice on how to do it. So if units on a scheme fall away, you will either need to input a substitute for the units and funding that isn't proceeding, or you will need to hand back those units and funding. If you're working on a line where the bulk line has already been zeroed out, so that's either automatically by it being a firm from a firm offer line originally, or because you've already split out all the units from an indicative line, then you can't add units or funding back into a bulk line that has 0 units and funding against it. It's effectively frozen for editing at that point. So next, I'm going to take you into IMS and I'm going to look at making the changes to edit that bulk line and reduce it by 1 unit to then later on add a single unit scheme profile into IMS. So I'm now back in IMS and I'm going to move to the offer system and then select profiles and then go into my indicative line. Let's pick all of them, and my indicative one is the middle one. So I'm going to look to reduce this bulk line down to 9 units that I can take 1 unit out. So I click on the description to get into the detail, and you can see that there are no white boxes on screen that I can actually edit. So what I'm going to do to set that to edit, I'm going to click on Create New Profile Line Version. Okay, and then that sets boxes to editable. So I'm quickly coming out of IMS. If I could put a flashing light on this screen, I would do. There's a little bug in IMS. And it's really important that after you've created a new profile line version of your bulk line, which is exactly what I've done, that you save. You close the bulk line and then you go back into it. If you don't do this, there is one point in IMS where it will not save for you, and you will lose data because you're going to have to abandon the changes that you've made. So really important that you do that in IMS. So I'm going to go back into IMS and I'm going to actually do this. So I saved it, which pulled that one through, but I need to click on close and then I need to go back in. Okay, and now I'm fine to carry on. The bit that I wouldn't have been able to change until that bug is cleared is some of the values in the bulk schedule, which is the last thing that you come to. So let me start going through these changes. So on the profile, I need to reduce the units to 9. And I need to reduce the funding to 1,500. I've added too many twos there. Okay, so let me come off it and I can see that the comma's in. So yeah, the numbers does now look right. Now go to the organizations tab. The thing that I need to change here is that I need to reduce those units to 9. I've also got this box that I talked about before. Are you intending to work with SME contractors on this scheme? Well, this is my bulk line, so I can put no on my bulk line. I'll put yes on the scheme profile later on. So need to go into empty homes. Nothing to add on the bulk line for that. But I need to look at my revenue income. So remember that I'm on a shared ownership line. So my revenue income is income from the rental part of the shared ownership. So I need to change that, reduce that value down. On the top part of the screen, if you had a rental one and you were reducing down, then it's almost certain that the top numbers would stay the same because they're per unit. But that final one, which is the estimated rental income per annum, and it says gross rent. So that's all units. So that one, in the same way as this has been reduced, that would also need reducing. Let me go to the unit details. So it's still saying 10 units, and I need to change that to 9. Save. And to my then to my capital contributions. Now, one thing that you haven't seen on screen is that that save on the units has also updated this total initial sales income automatically on that save for me. So let me go through the rest of the values that are here and reduce those values. So there'll also be one that I need to enter as a brand new value. 38. Okay, so the other public subsidy is currently blank, but it does say double click on it to enter. So that's what I've done. And it brings up values that have already been zeroed out. If you have got contributions, you add them here. If not, click on the save button and that will transfer the zero back into the capital contributions for you. That is the only way to get that zero in. So now to the scheme costs, and the 3 costs that are there. Again, I need to edit. So next one's works costs. And as I said before, I've done a straight pro rata on these. You don't have to do a pro rata on them, provided grant and units ultimately match up, albeit that that might be across multiple lines, as I said before. Oh, I've entered something wrong there. So let me enter that again. Okay, so that's given me a surplus or deficit of £50, which means I've probably entered something wrong. So let me go back to my capital contributions. Yes. So in editing the provider's cross subsidy, that should have been 450. So I'll update that one. And now my scheme costs, there is 0 surplus or deficit on there, which is correct. So now to my bulk schedule. So that is currently showing 10 units in total, a 5 and a 5. So I'm going to take one of them off here. And I also at the same time need to reduce the payment for starts. So that payment for starts is going to reduce to 47,000. And I need to do the same on the completions. Okay, and then click on the save button. So you must enter comments at this stage. So bulk and reduced 1 unit to bulk, and click on the save button and then close. So what that's done is it's created an updated version, version 3, that's got this amended bulk line in it. If I were to validate at this point, you will see that I'll get a whole series of errors. So let me do that, even though I'm going to cover validating a bit later, but to show you the sort of things that you will get. Okay, so you will see that I have a whole load of material changes, changes in capital contributions, and so on. So I've clicked on OK, and I'm going to come out of that, and it's validated successfully. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a new site and then a new scheme profile. And although I can create that site within a scheme profile, I'm actually going to go to the sites part of IMS and create it there to start off with. It's a bit safer for you to do that, just in case anything goes wrong in the middle of it. So I'm going to take you back to IMS, and we'll look at creating that site and then going back to our profile to create the new scheme profile. So to create my site, I need to come out of the profile. I'm going to close profiles down. So the Offerline subproduct profile, I'm going to click on the blue door with the red arrow through it on the end of that line, and I'm going to look at sites. So I'm going to create a brand new site. So if I click on OK, the query filter automatically appears. That will bring through all sites, and I've only got one that's been set up. Do want to point something out to you. This has got the local authority of Tameside against it. My offer line is for Wigan, so I'm going to add a new site. So to add a new site, I click on the blue plus button, and I give it a description. So I'm going to call it Wigan video demo site 2B. It wants to know the local authority. So to find the local authority, I need to right click. So I can put in a name. I'm going to click on find. So it's 615, which I could have picked up the code from the offer line if I was in 2126. In RSAP, you'd have to find it this way. And I'm then going to click on the save button. Okay, so is it a strategic site for me? It's no. Brownfield or greenfield? Brown. Street shopfront infill? No. Traveller pitch automatically completed? No. You can change it if necessary. Is it greenbelt? No. Mechanisms to achieve efficiencies? For me, that's no. If you'd put in yes, then this list over here opens up for you to click all that apply. If you'd selected other, this box over here opens up for you to add information to. So the next tab is geography. So I need to add my XY coordinates. So 3, 6, 4, 6, 9. And my Y is 400, 5, 2, 8. So I'm now going to tab to the next field. And IMS does a check at this point. So for its XY coordinates, IMS will check against our spatial intelligence system and identify whether this is a rural site or not. So it's put the provider rural classification is automatically no. If they had got it wrong for any reason, you can change that to yes. What would automatically pull through if it had been yes, and an automatic yes, would that this information here would have identified the community size and so on. So let me click on OK, and let me put in the postcode. Now, if you haven't got a full postcode, that's fine. At this point, you can leave it blank, or you can just put in the first part of a postcode. But because this is an empty property that I'm going to be entering, I know that I've got a full postcode for it. So next to section 106. So this one asks, are these units part of a wider development that's got a section 106 on it? So it's not asking about these specific units, it's asking about the wider site. So on my site, the answer is no. And that will commonly be the case for a purchase and repair property. So nothing else opens up underneath. So let me click on the save button. Now what that's done is that has changed the status of the site to complete. And that's really important that that happens. And this is why I always enter sites via the site tab rather than the offer line or the profile, because if this doesn't happen, if it's incomplete, then you can only get back to it via the sites tab. So you're safer to go to sites to start off with. So let me click on the close button. So you'll now see I've got a Wigan site and I've also got a Tameside site. So let me click on the close button. So now I'm going to go back to my profile and I'm going to open that profile. So I'm now going to add a new scheme profile for the 1 unit. So to do that, I clicked on the blue plus. So I want a description. So it's 1 unit and £23,500 as a grant. And then I'm going to pick up the sites. So I could put the Tameside site in and ultimately that will give me an error. So I need to pick the Wigan site, click on the OK button and click on the save. Okay, so successfully saved and then everything else has opened up for me. So let me go along to the next tab, Organisations. So it hasn't automatically filled in developing, owner of land and owner of units for me. So let me click on the drop down and I can pick the appropriate provider for each of those. To add the owner of the units, I need to click on the blue plus, select a provider and put in the number of units. So that's going to be 1. Then tab across to empty homes. So I've got a whole load of questions here about these empty homes that I need to complete. So it asks, is it residential or non-residential? Number of units that are flats above shops. So this one's going to be a no, a 0. And the length of time the property has been empty. So here are all the options. So let me stick 6 months to a year on mine. So if this is homesteading or revolving fund, I can tick those boxes. But let me go now to the unit details. So now I need to enter a brand new unit detail. So to add my new unit detail, I'm going to click on the folded corner of a page. That opens a new one. So what type of housing do the units provide? So for 21-26, you choose the appropriate one. For RSAP, it should be disabled and vulnerable. And then I'm going to go through the rest of the fields. It's 1. The number of bedrooms is 2. 3 people. The building type, this one's going to be a house. Facilities are self-contained. Number of stories per dwelling for a house is quite obvious. So it's going to be 2 or 3. There is an option to pick a bungalow. So for flats, just to point out that the number of stories per dwelling refers to an individual property. It doesn't refer to the whole block. So block of apartments that was 10 stories high, each unit occupied 1 level. The answer to that question would be 1 and not 3 or more. Custom build. So for empty homes, that's going to be no. So do the units meet the wheelchair standards? A yes or no? I'm going to put no. Accessibility category matches the building regs. So it's going to be visitable. Are these intended as move-on accommodation? For my scheme under 21-26, the answer is no. So because this is empty homes, I'm getting asked some additional questions that I might not normally be asked. So ask reconfigure of existing residential to increase the number of units. So this one's no. And then we're asked, do the units incorporate arrangements intended to meet a particular group? So no. If they did, it would be yes, and you'd select that group. Then it wants to know my floor area. Do the units meet the nationally described space standards? Yes, and if the answer to that first question is yes, then all the others fill in automatically. If it's no, then you need to go through each of the questions in turn. So next I'm going to go to the last tab, which in this case is the shared ownership tab. So it wants to know my market value per unit. It wants to know initial first tranche sales, which was 30%. You don't need to put the percent sign in there. It then wants to know what the prospective rent is, which is the same as originally. And then I click on the Save button. For those of you that are doing RSAP, then it will ask you about the potentially these tabs that are here. So the revenue funding, the client groups, and possibly the happy principals. And actually, if you'd picked anything other than general needs, one or more of those could have appeared for you to complete under 21-26. So let me click on cancel and let me go to design. So this only applies to 21-26. So I've got some national design characteristics that I've met. So I'm going to click on those. There's an area at the bottom of the screen, but that has been greyed out. That is because I'm scheduling one unit out of bulk. These questions only become available when I've got 11 or more units on a scheme profile. Building for life only applies to 21-26, this screen. So have you carried out a building for life assessment? No, which means then that I'm not going to enter any of these. There are then some additional data questions on whole life cycle costs. So I'm going to put not applicable, and I've not got communal areas. So next, I'm going to go to capital contributions, and all of those have already been zeroed for me. But I need to look at how I match those to what I had before. So loan supportable was 31,500. I've then providers own resources, value there, 50,000. And some recycled capital grant. Okay. Now the final box here is total public subsidy. So let me double click on that and let me click on the save button. Okay. Now the interesting thing also to watch at this point is that previously that total initial sales income was 0. When I clicked on the other public subsidy save button, it's automatically updated that value and it's brought that value through from the unit data. One final one on this scheme is this little box at the bottom, which for this, we're not using guarantees, so that's 0. So next, I want my scheme costs. So I've got public land in here, so that should be a no. So next, purchase price. Our indicative, for me, that is going to be the current value. You can see acquisition equals current value. And that current value is automatically completed until we've identified whether it's been marked down in our accounts. If it's no, then it stays the same. If it's yes, then we have the opportunity to edit that value. So let me go back to no. So then it wants me to enter works costs. And on costs. And then it wants to know what my information is, but works costs are based on, which is QS estimates. Now, when I've entered the data on here, what I can see is that I've ended up with a surplus or deficit on my scheme because I've got a value there. So one of my values I've calculated incorrectly. So what I would do is I would go back and I would look at my capital contributions and I would look to fix that. So I will check through my values and make that change within the system. Okay, so what I've done is I've changed my on cost value to correct that value. So then my scheme forecast. So this is when you expect acquisition, start on site, and final cost to occur. Because this is a purchase and repair scheme, IMS has automatically assumed that you do not need planning permission on this scheme. So let me enter my date. So IMS will let me add an acquisition that is in the past. So let me enter a previous date for this. And all I've done is I've entered the numbers with a slash between them. The alternate way of entering dates I will show you now, which is to click on the drop down. So I'm going to put a start on site date of the 2nd of July. So click on that and click on select to transfer it across. Now, just so that you're aware, IMS does know when all the bank holidays and weekends are, so ultimately will not let you enter bank holiday dates in this. It will come up with a save message. So let me enter my final cost date, which I'm going to put as later. So let me put that in September, Monday the 20th September, select. And then finally, I've got some questions on MMC. Now, this only applies to 21-26. Now, you can see this has all been greyed out because I'm dealing with empty homes and there is nothing there. Let me click the Save button and click on the Close button. But we've now got a new scheme profile and my units and funding now match to what they had originally been. So now I'm going to look at splitting a scheme profile in IMS. So I'm back in the offers system, and this time I'm going to go back to my video 2A line that I played about with for video 2A. And I'm going to look at how I would set up a split for this. So let me go into that profile. So what you can see is the bulk line. It's got nothing within that, but I've got 12 units here on this demonstration scheme profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into that scheme profile. And again, I will click on create a new profile line version. And I'll now be able to look at updating this for changing the units and so on. So let me point out everything that you will need to change, but I'm not going to actually go through that detail of actually physically changing everything in the video. So on the Profiles tab, I will need to change both the number of units and the funding requested. On the Organisation tab, I will need to change the number of units. Similarly, on the unit details, I will need to edit one or more of the unit types that might be appearing here. For me, there's only one, and I will need to change that number of units. So you can just double click on it and change the appropriate unit, the number of units there. So coming out of that, design doesn't have anything to do with number of units on there, neither does Building for Life, but I will need to edit my capital contributions and reduce the non-zero values down to make space for the new scheme profile. Similarly, on my scheme costs, I will need to reduce these 3 values down to make space for the new profile. And then the scheme forecast, no changes as such unless you need to change dates on there. Similarly with MMC, and they're the only changes that need to be made. So I'd then add some comments and save and then close. I'm just going to close this one. So then I would follow exactly the same process that I did for when I was working with a bulk line. I would click on that blue plus to add a brand new scheme profile to pick up those units that are being phased. Now, it might be that that's on a different tenure. that will either need to be on a separate profile or a separate offer line within the system. So next, some common save and validation errors. So the most common error when you're splitting is units and funding not balancing. And if you're adding in different offer lines, that's absolutely fine within the system. The other one is because you're playing about with all the funding and the costs, it's very easy to find that you've entered a figure incorrectly, just like I did on the reducing the bulk line and ended up with a surplus or deficit. I cleared that error at that point, so it doesn't need clearing later on in the system. But just remember, when you are splitting, it's not just your units and funding, it is all your capital contributions and your scheme costs that will need splitting. And as I've said before, it is much easier and you're far less likely to make mistakes if you do those number calculations in advance. The other save and validate errors that you might come across are identical to inputting those offer lines and firm schemes. So the firm scheme video has a bit more about those errors in there. So next in IMS, I'm going to look at validating and submitting. So I'm going to go back into my indicative line where I made all those changes. And there's a two-stage process, as you will have seen from claiming video 2A. So I need to validate. Okay, so I have a number of material changes. And like in claiming video 2A, if I look at them, I'll see that the monthly profile of payments and units are changing. So there's 5 material changes. There'll be 2 for starts, 2 for completions, and 1 for acquisition. As I explained in video 2A, acquisition will just pull up a change that the month for the payments is going to be achieved is going to be different. The starts and completions will identify units and payments counting. So they'll carry on further down. I've got some change information. I've got some further messages of things that I might not have added that need to be looked at before I'll be able to claim a scheme on here. And there's also some changes where I've added additional data. So let me click on the close button. Click on OK. And now I am ready to submit. So I've got some material changes as I identified a minute ago, but now it looks like I've only got one, but they've been grouped on this screen. So let me double click as it says, and I'll see all 5 of those. So click on the close button and splitting 1 unit. Click on the save button. Okay, and save again, and then submit. So okay, so I've entered a short comment in there and then click on the enter button. And this is now, as identified at the top, submitted these changes for Homes England to review. When I was putting those comments in, if I was doing the changes in 2 places, that's where I should be referencing the other part of the change. So just a quick recap on that submitting bit. So you respond to the validation messages as necessary. You must respond to material changes. They're the only ones that you must respond to. You'll then add an overall submission comment, and clicking on that submit button passes control to Homes England to review what you've submitted. So, finally, the other videos in the series. So, for new users, there are 5 claiming videos. You've been watching claiming video 2B, which is indicative to ready to claim. But claiming 1 is a claiming overview. Claiming 2A is taking a firm offer line through to ready to make a claim. Claiming video 3 is to set up to being able to claim, and that's something that you only need to do once in the system before your first claim. That's the next video to watch if you are making your first claim. If not, you can go straight to video 4, which will be about achieving and claiming your milestones. Claiming videos 1 to 4 will also be included in the RSAP playlist of videos. For experienced users of IMS, there is also a claiming upgrade video on that separate playlist. So that will show you the differences to the 1621 program.